As said, I'm Gal Inbar. In terms of my background in robotics, so I was involved for about a decade in turning around Israeli middle market industrial businesses, and through that I did some of my companies were involved in changing their automation, and I was looking into deploying robots into my production lines. Around 2012, I saw Rodney Brooks presenting the first prototypes of cobots. It blew my mind, and I started trying to bring in over cobots to my production lines. Later on in 2015, I flew to Rethink Robotics, Rodney's company, and managed to convince them that I should be their Israeli distributor, and managed to deploy quite a large number of robots since then in the Israeli Academy and Israel production lines, mostly from Rethink Robotics. In 2019, I switched and sold my equity in the business, and since then I'm doing a lot of business development in Pittsburgh. During my time with iCobots, the time in which I deployed a lot of cobots, I was heavily involved with the Boston robotic ecosystem, both with mass robotics and with quite a number of companies that are active in that ecosystem. I met a lot of companies from the West Coast and also in Europe. And in the past 2 years, I'm heavily involved with Pittsburgh, where just I think 2 weeks ago, they relaunched RoboPGH, which is the equivalent of mass robotics in Pittsburgh, and they have more than 100 companies that either do robotics or robotics-related technology. So lots of technology there. You probably are more familiar with Carnegie Mellon, which is based in Pittsburgh and generates a lot of robots. So before the COVID, we saw that the arms, the drones, and the AMRs are starting to become standardized. In terms of arms, I'm referring not to big robots. I'm talking about more of cobots. We started seeing even cobots starting to come out of the east, and I think until 2018 we haven't seen any such robot coming from the east. And when such robots are starting to come from China, it means that the hardware prices would start to decline. Drones, I don't need to tell you about DJI and what's happening there. And in the AMR field, at least pre-COVID, we haven't seen a price decline. We started seeing all kinds of really nice videos of use cases on YouTube, but in terms of real sales, I think that pre-COVID we were talking about less than 100 units really sold of this specific model, and the rest of the models that you now may see, some deployments were still in first POCs. Another thing that we started seeing is the capacity of robots to connect into the internet, either for remote management, or just to upload and download information through the web. And we started seeing deployments of cameras integrated into robotics. Again, when you go to the academy, when you go to the YouTube, you can see such deployments even back 2015, 2014. But when I'm talking about the domain that I'm involved with, which is real life deployment, we just started seeing, at least in Israel, just on I think the first vision deployments that were integrated with robots. We started seeing them scaling around 2018, 2019. The challenges, at least from my perspective, was that maybe it's a little, I don't know how many of you remember the time at the 80s when the first personal computer came out, but each computer had a basic programming, and although everybody called it basic, every syntax of every basic programming was a bit different. When you look at the current robots, and again I'm talking about the deployed one, the ones that come with some kind of a user interface from either UI, Rethink Robotics, or many other brands that came to the market, we see each one has a unique UI. Nothing currently is really autonomous. We start seeing, let's say, first pieces of behavior that might be considered autonomous. everybody are talking about the safety, but in terms of having something which is really safe, we are not there yet. Even under the category of cobots, in terms of being certified as safe, it's about everything from this area to this area. But when it needs to move around, or if you do all kinds of changes in the end of arm, you have to do special certifying in order to be for it to be really safe. Most of the people who deploy it never do that, but this is a risk. And the last thing is, although there might be remote control or some connectivity between robots, at least pre-COVID, we do not see a robot to work in sync. We try to do, for example, we looked into POCs of picking up a very large object with two robots, each arm taking a different side of those big objects. So in terms of capacity, we started seeing the capacity, but in terms of deployment, I don't think we saw any real deployments of multi-robot work pre-COVID. Again, if you search the YouTube well enough, you might find, but I'm not sure that it would show the real things that happened on the ground. And then COVID hit, and I saw quite a number of people who came out and called startups and called robotics distributors, come and give us your solutions, because if you're talking about manufacturing, we want to move everything that is done by human that we can to robots. If you're talking about hospitals, we want as little contamination as possible. But everybody said we want something which is inexpensive, it's highly reliable, it's autonomous, it effectively works on a wide range of use cases, because again, when it needs to replace a human, usually people do a lot of things. We needed to have a quick setup, we need zero deployment time, we want the UI to be very intuitive, and we want it now. And if you look at the list of the requirements, and if I look at the different use cases that we saw people trying to deploy, then if you think of the best of the best that was available at the day of the beginning of the COVID, I don't think anything fit this full description. Moreover, most of the companies who came out running and shouting, we need, didn't want to spend money, because the COVID just begun. We don't know what will happen tomorrow. The governments around the world said we might give money, but it was not sure that the money would flow in to finance all this. And supply chains, you couldn't get a guarantee from your suppliers that you would get the hardware that you need for the deployment. So even a deployment with the things that you have usually would be on a very small scale and not scalable. We ended up actually doing things quite different than we should have. The first thing I think I saw more than 20, maybe even if I count very carefully, maybe even 30 companies pivoting into doing some kind of an AMR that is spraying some kind of a juice over the potential viruses, or using all kinds of UV lights in order to try to fry them. A lot of POCs, very few of them matured into products, and the ones who matured into products, and I'm well aware, not in Israel, but abroad, of at least 2 companies who matured into products. As far as I know, they sold very few units of this type. A lot of the pilots failed. For example, I'm well aware of several telepresence pilots that were conducted. Nurses understood as the pilots went on that most of the work in contaminated area is not just to see and to speak with the people, but a lot of it had to do with maybe pressing this button, or calibrating something, or touching something, and it got them very frustrated. Another thing was the fact that all those systems could not be decontaminated once they went out of the area. There were some failed attempts to try to pull laundry or trash using telepresence robots because this was what available around, and of course they were never built to do this. And another use case that might have been very successful is to allow friends and family to connect to loved ones who are under quarantine. But the challenge there was to manage the identities of the people who would log in, which is a challenge. And also everyone who logged from far might have seen the person who's lying in the next floor, and these have a lot of privacy issues, which are all things that if we had a lot of time and a lot of capacity, we might have solved. But again, under COVID, nobody had the bandwidth to start dealing with that. So again, a lot of pilots, a lot of failures. Every robot that was just charged nearby a hospital or nearby a production line got a picture, and you read big headlines about big deals and about big deployments. As far as I know, almost nothing or nothing was realized. And I think that a lot of the companies who joined the early hype and got bashed by reality licked their wounds and understood that they need to figure out something better. And I think the companies who survived this period came out much more focused on what they need to do next. When we are looking about where robots are heading, so I think the first thing that I really like is that robotics companies are no longer branding themselves as robotic companies, but they are branding themselves as specific solutions to specific verticals. So you can see a lot of robotics getting into HLS, Homeland Security, Nagorno-Karabakh, and I think also maybe some of the things we just saw a few weeks ago in Gaza, I think would give autonomous systems and robotics a huge boost. Healthcare, now in, let's say, after the initial COVID frenzy, the healthcare systems, I think, understood a little better how to address robots, how to align expectations. Again, a lot of the people who looked at robots at the beginning of the COVID, it was the first time they saw robots, and their expectations skyrocketed. After everybody failed miserably at the first round, everybody are coming now to the second round with much more aligned expectations. And the last thing, which we are starting to see both globally and in Israel, we have already some suppliers that are bringing in service robots, and this is something which I expect to see slowly picking up. One of them is ROBOTICS, and Amnon is here. Amnon, are you still here? Amnon is here. He's leading service robotics at ROBOTICS. We see that people are accepting the fact that full autonomy of robots would not be achieved in the very near future. But we do see, and we saw earlier in one of the presentations, the concept of teleoperated robots or semi-teleoperated robots is starting to infiltrate. I think a lot of it has to do with very big leaps in the autonomous cars industry. All the level 4 autonomy companies are developing tools that are easily later can be deployed into robots. If you know, Utopia is a wonderful Israeli company who does software for these challenges. Next is the drones and robotic fleets. We saw some very beautiful drones flying in all kinds of shapes and figures in the skies. We see that robotic fleets are starting to pick up, mostly currently in logistics. I did this presentation about 3 weeks ago. Limor would present after me, and some of these slides are just corresponding with the things that he would speak about with regards to Move AI, which exactly is focused on this thing. In terms of SLA, one of the, I think, the big leaps forward is that now everything is connected, and as everything is connected and can be remotely teleoperated, the SLAs are much improving, and I think the SLA was one of the biggest barriers of real deployments, and now that you can remotely connect and take a robot back from a problem to production in a matter of minutes, or even in a matter of an hour or two, and not wait 1 or 2 days as it was the regular practice pre-COVID. This is a big impact on ROI. And the last thing that I think that people realize, again, because of the experiments during the COVID, is that there isn't Industry 4.0 revolution, and there isn't robotics revolution. It is an evolution. And as in evolution, people are starting to understand that now it would have a certain functionality, and later on it would have better functionality. I think the wonderful example we had with Tesla, which now is offering to send upgrades of the performance of the sold hardware. I think we will see more of that also in the robotic world. The challenges. So one of the things that we see in a lot of clips for quite a long time. 4 minutes? Okay, no problem. It's like 2 slides. So one of the things that we see in clips for quite a lot of time, but nobody is really practicing it, is the building AMRs that have arms connected to them. There are a few products in the market, but none of them, as far as I know, are for general purpose. And I think there is a lot of work to be done there, both in the software side and in the safety side, and also maybe in the design side. I think that in terms of end effectors, there are all kinds of very interesting experiments, from soft robotics to all kinds of multi-purpose end effectors. I do think that this type of end effectors that try to imitate human arms, at least so far I haven't seen real deployments of it. It's a very complex challenge in terms of computing all those degrees of freedom. But I think that we will end up with such end effectors on the long run, because it would be much cheaper to deploy these kinds of end of arms than to change the reality in which workers and people are working on to accommodate them for robots. Take, for example, doorknobs. Think of the cost of changing all the doorknobs so robots would be able to open them, or to get a scale of this thing. And I'm not talking about selling 100 or 1,000 of these, but I think that when they will sell the 100,000 of these things, they could drop down to the level of, I don't know, $100, $150 with software and everything. Again, I think that we are a few years away from that, but I do expect the world to go there. All the world of integrated tactile perception, I don't think that a lot of startups are working on that. I'm involved with a very interesting company which is called Wirebot that does tactile perception. Think of visual perception and how much AI was involved in it, and then think of the tactile things that you receive from your fingers, and think how much knowledge and how much smart things you could have done if you could deploy AI into how you pick things and how you screw things with the end of arms. Another thing is the standard language. I'm still waiting for some standards like we have in the mobile system, the iOS and the Android. We still don't have the common language that is standard for the robotics. I know of many companies who are claiming to just within few months, for the past 2-3 years, to come out with this next thing, and I'm still waiting. And the last challenge here is to build the legal framework for drones and for autonomous cars which will enable large-scale deployment of those two very promising technologies. What's in the pipeline? So I think we will see, and this is in terms of acceleration, a lot of ongoing software innovation and upgrades. So a lot of the hardware that we see now with the limited functionality, we see a boost in those functionalities. A lot of cheaper and better sensors. There are a lot of these in the pipeline. Some of them are already on the market, and the cost of building robots is going to continue to drop. Even though it already dropped dramatically, it's going to drop, I think, in another order of magnitude in terms of the cost of the hardware. I think we're going to see a lot of new end effectors. And the last thing which I want to say about the pipeline, I see a lot of companies who are focused on integration. They take a tool, they take some kind of a mobility platform, they add sensors, and they work on a specific use case. There are a lot of these companies in the pipelines. The risk in developing those companies is much, much smaller than in the classical robotic companies because they take off-the-shelf hardware, and the challenge is software and software integration. And I think that we are going to see, and again, I hope that we will see some of those companies coming out of Israel, but I think that the big unicorns that we will see in the next 3 to 6 years in robotics would be mostly companies who just figured out a really effective integration. We are starting to see, for example, some of these in the agri-tech world. That's it. These are my contact details. You're welcome to send me an email. If you reach out to me via LinkedIn, just drop a line about the context of who you are and why you're reaching out, and I'll be happy to connect and talk with you. I love to have a cup of coffee with entrepreneurs with some great ideas and to give them some feedback, and sometimes, if it is relevant, to hook them up with other good people. Thank you very much. Questions?